5 sentences. That is the length of the order for the Supreme Court last night. The order that, with no explanation, blocked a Texas law that threatened to close most of the state's abortion clinics. 5 sentences saved almost 1 million Texas women from having to travel more than 150 miles to access an abortion clinic. 2 weeks ago, a ruling from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals closed 13 clinics across the state, leaving a large portion of the state without access to abortion. But today, because of the court's order, these clinics will be allowed to reopen. Clinics like the Whole Women's Health in McAllen, Texas, where earlier this month, the staff had to cancel appointments for about 40 women as they closed their doors. Some of these women said they had considered traveling to Mexico to get abortion-inducing drugs instead of making the 240-mile drive to the nearest clinic. But the Supreme Court's order is just a stopgap measure. And the legal fight over abortion rights in the state of Texas and throughout the rest of the country will be a long one. Joining me now is the president of Planned Parenthood Action Fund, Cecile Richards, and president of NARAL Pro-Choice America, Ilyse Hogue. No two better people to talk with, period, and especially about this issue. Cecile, how much of an indication is the Supreme Court's 5-line statement that the state of Texas is going to have a hard time holding on to these closures?
Well, I think, look, this was a really important decision. Obviously, as you said earlier, this has changed everything for women's access, but it's only temporary. We're going to be in court a long, long time, but at least for today, this is a really important victory. I think what we saw over the last 10 days at our Planned Parenthood health centers that had remained open was a public health catastrophe. You know, women who had lost their doctors overnight, who were panicked, didn't know what had happened. And I hope this means that the Supreme Court took notice of actually what this means when people get in the way of women getting access to health care. You
know, Ilyse, I wonder how you sort of read this 5-line pronouncement. I mean, it's unclear whether, potentially Justice Roberts sided on reproductive freedom, or was it more of a decision to follow sort of our judicial system, which is during an appeals process, you're not actually supposed to shut the clinics because they may never open again?
I mean, this is a procedural ruling, so I support what Cecile said. We should give thanks. We should be grateful that women are getting the health care that they need today, but I wouldn't read the tea leaves too much. And it's really important to remember Justices Scalia, Alito, and Clarence Thomas said it is okay to deny women health care effective immediately, and that should deeply concern everyone in this country.
This is the first time the court has kind of gotten involved directly in the abortion question. Are we going to see a revisitation of some version of Roe v. Wade in the next term?
Well, I think absolutely this case or some version of this is going to the Supreme Court. And so one of the most important things I think we all have to do, and we've been working on this a lot in Texas, is collect the stories to really understand what does undue burden really mean. And if the Texas law is an undue burden, I don't know what it is. So we've been having, collecting stories from women who are coming into our health centers, collecting them online. And I do hope that when this does go to the Supreme Court, that the Supreme Court actually listens to and hears from women what these kinds of rulings mean.
Yeah, I feel like the narrative of what is happening to these women, I mean, I think it's fascinating that Greg Abbott has deemed that, 150, 200 miles is not undue burden. Not that Greg Abbott will ever know what constitutes an undue burden in terms of accessing abortion. Getting the narrative from the women who are affected by this is so critical, Ilyse.
Yeah, well, I think absolutely. And, where the stories are pouring into all of our organizations, but it's critical for your viewers to remember or know that in 2011, a study was done just on the restrictions then in Texas. That predates all of these clinic closures that showed that already 7% of women in that state that needed abortion care were attempting to self-abort. I totally reiterate what Cecile said, which is this is a public health catastrophe, and how many women have to be hurt before we recognize that the court's responsibility is the welfare and upholding of constitutional rights.
It's not just in Texas, though, right?
That's right.
Let's talk about what is happening in Tennessee. Sort of help us make sense of what may come to pass in Tennessee, Cecile, and what that portends for women, not just in the state of Tennessee, but in surrounding states, 1 in 4 abortions in Tennessee is from outside the state because restrictions are so severe elsewhere.
Right. Well, I think Tennessee's a good example. We also have Tennessee and Colorado ballot initiatives that would essentially make it very, very difficult, if not impossible, for women to access abortion services in those states. But even bigger than that, I think, you look at what's happened in Texas, and there are candidates on the ballot all across the country. Cory Gardner in the state of Colorado. You can look at Tom Tillis in North Carolina. These are people who have the exact same positions of Greg Abbott, of Rick Perry in Texas. And what I have been surprised and I guess heartened to see that people are looking at Texas and seeing a cautionary tale. What happens if you elect people who are willing to pass laws and champion bills that take away women's rights? Well,
and we're not just talking about access to sort of ambulatory surgical centers and abortion clinics being made into ambulatory surgical centers. We're talking about personhood amendments. We are talking about, in Colorado, giving legal constitutional rights to a fertilized egg. In North Dakota, Measure 1 could criminalize miscarriage. I mean, the ripple effect in terms of just women having basic control over their bodies in the reproductive process, it could be devastating.
Absolutely, Alex. I mean, we are talking about a broad sweeping agenda by an extreme minority in this country that wants people to believe this is about whether or not it's easy for women to get abortion. That's not what it's about. It's about controlling women's lives, controlling our reproductive destiny, which of course informs everything else we do in the world. Unless your viewers only think this is happening in red states. In Pennsylvania, 2 weeks ago, we saw a mother sentenced to 18 months in prison for helping her daughter get pills that would induce abortion off the internet because they couldn't get to a clinic, because in Pennsylvania, roadblock after roadblock has been put up. This mother wanted to do right by her daughter. She's going to prison for 18 months.
Let me just, because both of you guys are experts in sort of politics and the women's vote. I mean, this would seem to be a terrible issue. I mean, that story right there, a mother being thrown into jail because she's trying to help her daughter terminate an unwanted pregnancy that could define the rest of her life. I mean, that is not, I mean, there are soccer moms that would vote on that issue.
And they are. I mean, you're exactly right, Alex, and I think Ilyse's point is dead on. This is, in every single competitive race in this country, the reason they are competitive is because the gender gap is a mile wide. Yeah. Because women and men who care about women are saying they will not vote for candidates who want to pass these kinds of restrictions, not only on access to safe and legal abortion, access to birth control. All the people that we're listing, they championed the Hobby Lobby decision. They would let employers refuse women access to birth control. So I actually feel like these are issues that are very much on the minds of voters, and I think they're going to be determinative in some of the elections in November.
And by the way, guess who knows this? Scott Walker knows it. That's why he's backpedaling as fast as he can from his position of restricting abortion and supporting Hobby Lobby. Every candidate knows this. That's why it's so important to lay their record out and ask the hard questions.
The ladies on the front line, it is so great to see you. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Cecile Richards and Ilyse Hogue, thanks for your time.
Great to be with you,
Alex.
Coming up.